Well, I'm delighted to say that we are joined now in the studio by the wonders of Zoom, by Baron Jones of Birmingham, Digby Jones. How do you prefer to be called, sir? Let's start that off, shall we?
Oh, yeah. Well, Baron is, I always think it has connotations of nastiness and greed in the Middle Ages, and then it is the official, in the official title, but I'm technically actually Digby, Lord Jones of Birmingham, because you can't put a Christian name between the Lord and the surname. But everybody on earth, the first time, I'm known as Lord Digby Jones, and that's fine by me. Second time, I'm probably known as Diggs or Digby, and the third time I'm known as Fat Gip. So I suppose at the end of the day,
well, I think that last time I met you face to face, you'd just come towards the end of your term as Director General of the CBI, actually. So that was a while back, wasn't it? Now, so.
And I can remember. I think we were in Telford.
We were indeed, and a lot's gone under the bridge since then.
Yeah, and if you want to feel old about that, that was 16 years ago.
Oh dear. Well, thankfully we haven't aged a bit, have we? So.
And there was a direct train that was starting in Shrewsbury and going down to Marylebone.
There was.
And Mr. Branson was getting seriously peed off about it because it was hurting his traffic going into Euston. And I remember saying to one of Virgin's people, well, welcome to competition, because it's the only winner on that's going to be the passenger.
Well, I tell you what, interestingly, then that's a perfect place to start now, isn't it? Because fast forward now, 16 years, Birmingham New Street, we've got commuters that are desperately trying to get in and out of the city. We've got rail strikes, we've got strikes left, right and centre. Where do you stand on all of this at the moment? Because obviously, it's becoming increasingly tense, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was the Duke of Wellington, wasn't it, at Waterloo, who said, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. And if Mick Lynch wants to carry on making a mistake, well, that's fine by me. I mean, I feel very sorry for the people he really hurts. You see, the world has changed. It's a pity the trade unions haven't changed with it. And they shall wither on the vine of irrelevance if they're not careful, because you see, so many people can work from home. So many people can think of alternative ways of dealing. So many employers can use technology in ways that weren't available years ago. And the strike, the withdrawal of labour, whilst I would certainly not pass legislation to ban them, I really would not. I think the withdrawal of your labour is an inherent freedom in a society. So I don't for a minute subscribe to those who would ban them. But it is an act of self-harm, because the people who can make choices about how they get to work, what they do, where they work, aren't going to be hurt by this at all. The people who are lower paid, unfortunately, who have to go to work and they have to stand on platforms, I'm thinking particularly, I guess, within the M25 for that purpose, they are hurt. So when I hear Mr. Lynch saying, I'm fighting here for working people, it's the very people he's hurting. And when I hear that, the Luddites say you need 6 people to check a track when there's all the technology out there that they won't allow come anywhere near it. When you've got an inspection crew sitting at King's Cross, it can't go and help an overworked crew at Euston, and all of this. I mean, this is a politicised one from one point of view, which is they want to bring down a Tory government. And it's actually, from the employer point of view, they're trying to get some of these Spanish practices and flexible working ideas. They're trying to change it all. And actually, the money side of this is secondary. It's become a far more polemic, political, small p and capital P, I guess, issue than ever it is the money. And the money, I mean, these boys are well paid. I mean, although I might have a view about whether nurses should withdraw their labour, and I think there's a degree of signing up to something special when you're a nurse that you don't. But my sympathy is with a nurse who's on half the money that a train driver's on. And for a train driver to sit there and say they're badly paid, well, I don't get it. And of course, at the end of the day, if you look at the West Midlands, it is in the hub of the country. It's the crossroads of the nation. And every time you ever put crossroads down from the Roman legions onwards, you create wealth, because people stop, people change, people move to other places, people experience meetings and ideas. A bit of it flows off and 10% stays with where it is.
But also...
It's been the same with ports and railways and aircraft forever. And so it matters. If you don't have a quality rail network, the Midlands will suffer because of where it is.
And also, as you say, though, the climate has changed, the way we do business, the way we live our lives has changed. And if COVID has shown us one thing, it's shown that there is not one way of getting about your daily lives. So if there's an obstruction or an obstacle in one way, the British business community finds a way, doesn't it?
Well, if you think about it, my friend, you and I are having a quality conversation, and we are hundreds of miles apart. And this would never have been thought of years ago. And I'm sitting in my study, you're sitting in a studio, and it's a quality technological advance. Now, that was accelerated by the whole pandemic issue. Societies changed so much in so many ways. Mankind went about its work in a different way. Politicians had to blend in different. The economies of the Western world went absolutely down the pan. Life has changed, and it's there for the taking of people who get it, understand it, think out the box, and think of other ways of doing things. And there are some damn good quality trade unionists, good quality people, and they don't want to see their jobs wither on the vine of irrelevance, do they? They want to put food in their bellies, a roof over their head, a good future for their kids, just like you and me. And they deserve better, frankly.
Talking of one thing which I think was most definitely not irrelevant is the Commonwealth Games from last year. I don't know whether you were sitting in your study hundreds of miles away watching it, or in the city, or a bit of both. But, what we took away from it here is so many people saying, wow, look at this city called Birmingham. Isn't it fantastic? Isn't it energetic? Isn't it beautiful? But, I mean, you and I, we've known this for years, haven't we? Isn't it great that it's out in the public now?
Well, you're so right. A wonderful subject to bring up. I mean, I was lucky because when I was made a peer of the realm, and as I said, I don't particularly like the Baron bit, but I quite enjoy the Lord bit. And when I was Lord Jones, and they said, "Where do you want to be from?" And I said, "Birmingham." And they said, "Well, we don't do the big cities," but they wanted me a bit more than I wanted them, I think. So they gave me Birmingham. And why? Because I was born in King's Heath. My mum was born in Small Heath and grew up in Yardley. My dad was born in Burnley Lane off Ward End. I'm through and through. And we all know God is alive and well and keeping goal for Aston Villa. And he won the goalkeeper, won the World Cup, by the way. And I just thought I'd throw that in. And
you just know I'm a Wolves fan, Digby. You're just trying to just stir it up, aren't you? That's why.
That's why I said it. One day you'll follow a football club. And so don't. And so Birmingham is extremely near and dear to my heart. And I was a lawyer there for 20 years in Edmund Street, opposite the old eye hospital, now the Hotel Divan. And then I went to the CBI and the government and all the rest of it. So Birmingham mattered. So when the Commonwealth Games, I mean, I take my hat off to Birmingham, the West Midlands generally, and indeed the government for supporting it. They got the whole thing together and delivered in half the time cities normally do, because it was going to go to Durban, and Durban said they couldn't afford it, and it came to Brum, who said they'd put it on, and God bless them. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to the VIP opening ceremony, and I was so proud. We had a little ceremony, a little reception in the NIA, in the National Indoor Arena, and then we were bussed out to the home of Birchfield Harriers, of course, the womb of so many fabulous athletes over the years, and then saw the opening ceremony, and my heart was going boom, 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 and I was thrilled to bits. My old rival in Birmingham, when I was senior partner of Edge & Ellison, John Crabtree was senior partner of Rag & Co, and he always told me that I was the second best lawyer in Birmingham, and I was told him he was. And of course, the sad thing was he wasn't lying, and I was. And he damn good bloke. And he chaired it, and he delivered it, and he got a knighthood a couple of weeks ago in the New Year's honours list. And I rarely have I seen knighthood so richly deserved. It was fabulous to see. Put Birmingham on the map again, you see.
Do you think Birmingham gets the credibility it deserves on all sorts of levels, not just for Commonwealth Games, but for business, for energetic attitude, innovation, for everything?
Well, when you think it's the cradle of the Industrial Revolution, innovation was born and raised. And remember what innovation is. Innovation is not invention. Invention is actually making a reality of an idea. Innovation is taking that reality to market. there've been loads of very, very clever inventors who died paupers, because it's the innovators that make the money. Steve Jobs is a classic example. At the end of the day, this little darling is made for threepence halfpenny in Vietnam, shall we say? I don't know, but wherever. That's not actually where the money was. The money was in the cleverness of taking all that bit and making you and I be able to press 2 buttons and get it to work. That's the innovation. Well, the James Watts and the Murdochs, they're the Boltons. They were all Brummies, and they were the innovators. And Birmingham was there. Well, it's never asked for favours from anybody. It's never been. The northern cities, which were fabulous. I mean, they were huge lungs and hearts and pumping out stuff. But at the end of the day, they didn't reinvent themselves quickly enough when the storm clouds of a post-industrial world hit. Birmingham did. Birmingham really got on the page of tomorrow. And then that went and it got on the page of another tomorrow. And the other thing that Birmingham always did was make a success of immigration. Over the years, is it ever crossed your mind? Birmingham is one of the very few successful European cities that doesn't have a river running through it. And with great respect to the River Ray, which is there in a trench somewhere, but it's not a river in the same way. And you needed, before railways, you needed rivers to get your goods in and out. And then, of course, you then needed rivers for the whole ecological issue. And Birmingham never had a river, and yet it succeeded enormously. And why? Because it was an open city. The word went out around Europe. If you're having a hard time, if your talent isn't being exploited, if at the end of the day you want to improve your life, if you need religious freedom, because Birmingham was always religiously free. It never was a stronghold of one or other of the religions. And it always was religiously tolerant years ago. The word went out, come to Birmingham, work hard, live in peace, pay some tax, bring up your kids. And over the years, the hundreds of years, we had loads of different nationalities into Birmingham. Immigration in Birmingham is not a new thing at all. And so on that basis, the challenge is there again. You've got a young population. The opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games showed, it was very proud of its diversity. There were lots and lots of different nationalities in there and everything else. The Commonwealth Games team from England itself was stuffed full of different colours of skin and different religions and different heritage. I mean, it's wonderful to see. I mean, a fabulous thing. And Brum has always managed to make that happen and do well. And that's one of the big challenges, actually, for the coming time. Its proximity to London never helped, because people, it was quicker and easier to get to London if you needed stuff than if you were in Manchester or Leeds or Liverpool or Newcastle. So it never helped. That never helped. But on the other hand, you were I use the word cheaper, others would say better value for money, alternative to London, which was a good thing. I worry. I'm a fan of HS2.
I was just going to ask you where you stand on HS2. What do you think?
Well, I voted for it in the House of Lords for a different reason to most. I mean, I wouldn't have started it going up to Brum. I mean, I'd have brought it down from Scotland. I'd have started it in Edinburgh or Glasgow and brought it south. And there would have been so much international, national unification conclusion about that. But there again, because that's so obvious and simple, you don't expect politicians to do it, do you? But the upside is we have got to get capacity built in the rail network, because freight waits, because freight doesn't vote and passengers vote. So you always make sure the passengers get there and freight waits. Well, if you suddenly can get something to a place on a truck more easily than you can in a train, you don't go by train. So you've got to get freight onto rail. It's ecologically, it's environmentally sensible. You don't put all these big polluting trucks on the roads in quite the same way. You haven't got the room. We haven't got the capacity. And so HS2 will provide that in many ways. And also, there are some amazing stat, which is that I think it's 70 flights a day leave London's airports and don't cross salt water when they come down. In other words, it's an amazing stat. I mean, Well, I mean, that's bonkers, isn't it? I mean, that's sort of madness. I mean, you should be getting on a train and doing your 300 miles or your 200 miles on land. And those slots at airports should be used to go out into the world, because a slot is a slot. Whether a slot's putting a little plane up to Newcastle, or whether it's putting an A380 to Sydney, Australia, it's still a slot. It's still a takeoff. So if you can get those slots going internationally and then put this on speedy rail, there will be people. Do you know, I'll tell you this, Sydney Opera House is such a wonderful, iconic building. 80% of Sydney didn't want it. They used to say, oh, waste of public money, this is ridiculous, we're all going to vote against it. Massive argument not to have it built. Now you can't find an Aussie who doesn't think it's an iconic thing and part of Australia. So, I mean, you know, but that's why I would build it. The connectivity for Birmingham into London with it, I'm not so sure, actually. And I think the pandemic has probably exacerbated that situation, because so many people won't use it to go to work anymore because they can work from home.
They've changed their working patterns anyway, haven't they?
Of course.
You talk about politicians as well. Last week we had Rishi Sunak laying out his 5 pledges for 2023, one of which is halving inflation. Where do you stand at the moment in terms of what 2023 is going to be like for businesses in Birmingham?
Well, the problem with politicians making forecasts are the public expect them to make forecasts about things over which the politician has no control. And that's politics, but it's a complete waste of time, isn't it? I mean, you only need that madman in Moscow to do something, and inflation will go straight back up through the roof. I mean, inflation is probably tailing off. You know, I don't see it coming down anytime anytime soon, but I don't think you're going to see it going up anymore now. And I think 2023 will be a year of it levelling off and probably coming down a bit. Everybody's been talking recession up from America through to Germany and back again, and it hasn't happened yet. So the growth is blink and you'll miss it, but we're not yet down in the depths of recession, and we've still, you know, got quite a buoyant labour market. Most people watching this won't be able to get hold of quality, skilled people in their workplace.
And usually in a recession, it's completely the opposite to that, isn't it? So
you're so right. Yeah. You know, the classic textbook way of dealing with inflation is that you zap up interest rates so people can't borrow money to buy things. And therefore, because of that, supply drops. Therefore, because of that, jobs go. And therefore, because of that, wages come down because employers can pick and choose. Well, that's damn difficult to do when every employer is saying, give me more people.
We've heard stories in Birmingham of companies, you know, that are offering jobs to people, and then the candidates are coming back with counter offers saying, well, if you want me, you can give me an extra $5,000, I'll also have a car, and you can throw in working from home and private health, and the boot's on the other foot, isn't it, a bit?
Totally. It's a very tight labour market. I'm chairman of 5 different companies all over the country, and 2 of them are in the West Midlands, and I can tell you now, you know, unless you're offering work from home, as you just said, you know, the list, you haven't got a chance. Well, that's not typical recession territory. That's not typical central bank using interest rates as a tool to deal with inflation. It's an unusual situation. And if you were interviewing me today in Chicago or in the Ruhr or in Lyon, it would be the same issue. This is not a British issue. So, you know, Sunak is offering things there over which he has no control. Where he does have control is some firm management of this industrial unrest. And the last thing he must do is give in. He really must not give in, because it's not about actually, they are seeking, I don't think the nurses are politicising it, to be fair, but I think most of them are, the others are politicising it. But the issue is about, you can afford a pay rise if you can pay for it out of productivity enhancement. So I could give you an extra X% if you can produce X% plus a little bit, or at least the same X%. In other words, you're not going to inflate. You're not going to be inflationary because you're going to pay for it out of enhanced productivity. Well, if you can't do that, the public sector is a classic example of where you can't do that unless you agree to flexible working practices. Therefore, you can do that. Mr. Lynch. Yes, ding dong. Well, if you can, then 2 things should happen. You should get the pay rise. You should get a share of the money that you create, But secondly, you won't be inflationary in your pay. But if you're just going to say, oh, no, I'm not going to, I just want money, I'm not going to do all that. It's the economics of the madhouse. So the government must not give in. He has control of that. I think he also has control of some draconian stuff in the NHS to get rid of this appalling waiting list. And that, I know that politically this will be red rag to a bull, or that's the wrong colour to use for this, but you've got to get the private sector engaged in the NHS for delivery. Not for people to make more money, not for it to be privatised. Leave it in the government's hands. There's no politics in this, but get the private sector in and help and move it forward and get it done. Because actually, and it was a Labour Prime Minister who said this, it was Blair who said this was no Tory speak, when he said, what actually matters is what works. And you've got somebody waiting on the waiting list for some operation, and they really don't give a damn whether it's private sector, public sector, or what it is going to give them their operation. They want an operation,
don't they?
And they don't want to pay for it, which is absolutely right.
Absolutely.
So as long as those two things happen, they get their operation, and it's not free. It just means who pays for it, but nevertheless, it is free to them. If those two things happen, does it matter who actually employed the person who was wielding the life or holding the mask or changing the sheet? It's beyond belief the way they institutionalise and politicise what should be the basic delivery of a social service. So Sunak could do that one. I think the other thing Sunak could do is the small boats immigration. I think that will be a real game changer in the election in 2 or 3 years' time. The nation, and especially those red wall seats, a lot of them are in Birmingham, by the way, a lot in the West Midlands, of these red wall seats that went Tory for the first time in 2019. And some of it was Brexit. Some of it was they didn't want Corbyn. But quite a bit of it was, what are you going to do about all this, not quality immigration that Birmingham needs that we spoke of earlier, but the illegal immigration that's coming in and they're being put up in hotels. And what are you going to do about that? He can do things about that. And I think at the end of the day, it calls for some pretty serious stuff. It calls for people to be unpopular. But politicians, if they actually are seeking personal popularity, they're in the wrong game.
Well, I was just going to say, they're not here to be popular, are they? They're here to do what's right for the people. I've got to ask you one more question, Digby, because I'm conscious of the time. Wearing whichever of your hats, whether it's businessman, baron, man with a comma in his title, whatever it is, if there's one thing that you would like to bang the drum about and say, do this year for the sake of improving life for the business community in Birmingham, what would you do?
I'm going to answer it two ways. I'm going to say what for Birmingham, because that was your specific question, and then I'll do one on the rest. I would say I'd love Birmingham to be the first city in Britain where every able-bodied woman and man, regardless of their religion or their creed or anything, could read, write and count. I think to come out of school, to come out of a scholastic experience and still be unable to read, write and count is a disgrace. And we have a young population. And in a world where we're post-industrial, in a world where there's not much work for unskilled people anymore. And if there is, you're at the whim because you're paid not a lot of money. Well, if you can read, write and count, at least you're on the way to having a skill. And I think Birmingham got this reputation, in the jewellery quarter of the 1800s, where the canals started, which were skilled things. They're absolutely skilled in how they navigated these. Well, that's where the word navvy came from. They navigated these things. And the railways, and you move into the motor industry. Every single time it needed skilled people. And so for Birmingham, I would say there's not a businesswoman or a businessman watching this thinking, he's right. There's every single businesswoman and businessman will be thinking, yes, he's right. There's not one who isn't, because they can't get enough skilled people. And if I could just answer it the second way, which is for the nation, I just think everybody should calm down. I just think if all Sunak delivered for a year for business was boring, predictable stability, where you woke up in the morning and life, the business environment, was much the same as it was when you went to bed last night. If you could just have that for a year and everybody just calm down, then you can get on with investing. Then you can get on with taking the risk. Then you can get on with asking everybody to put in a bit because they're going to get more out at the end of the day. And I think Britain, it had a dreadful 2022. Everything from losing this fabulous woman who is our queen, all the way down to the strikes and Ukraine, pandemic. You know, it was not a clever year. And of course, emotions run high. And of course, people feel hard done by, and rightly too. I mean, you know, there are a lot of these people on strike who are finding it difficult and all of that. And there's loads of people, by the way, in the private sector who don't get inflation-proof pensions, who don't even get a pay rise this year, let alone 9%, who are working their whatsits off to make sure that they keep their job. The private sector develops and produces the profits which pay the tax and employ the people. And the public sector should just remember that sometimes. But what private sector needs to survive to do this is stability, boring, predictable stability. And if British business could have that, and Birmingham could skid its feet, then I'll tell you what, we'll bring home the bacon. That we really will.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Digby. Let's not get too boring though, because we still want things to talk about on Birmingham Business TV for the rest of the year. But thank you so much for your time. It's great to catch up. We must make sure we don't leave it 16 years next time.
No, and could I just say, I think your whole initiative, what the programme's about, what you're trying to achieve, is so important. And when I was Director General of the CBI, I used to go on about why don't we have more business media specialities? Why don't we have more people caring regionally? Why don't we actually push the message out? And you're doing it all, my friend. And I applaud you, and I wish you a wonderful new year.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to catch up with you as ever. Thank you, Digby.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.